Alright, well, welcome to the Boris user interface. Whether you're using Graffiti, FX, or RED, whether you're opening as a standalone engine or as a plugin through your favorite nonlinear editor, this is the way it's probably going to look, very similar. You can see you've got different windows here. Each is movable, each is scalable to fit your needs. And if you've got two monitors, you can spread these out nicely across both of the monitors. As you can see, sometimes it might be easy to get a little jumbled here and get your timeline underneath your composite window, underneath your controls window, or whatever. There's a very quick and easy shortcut to get things back to the way they should be, and that's Control on the Windows side, Command on the Mac side, and semicolon. Snaps everything right back to normal. It is possible to change the configuration, move your timeline up here, for example, use your composite window down here. However, I strongly recommend you stick with the configuration it defaults to, as your Control or Command semicolon will put it back that way. This is a very nice interface. It works very well in this configuration, so I suggest you just stick with this like I do. However, it's completely up to you if you'd like to change it in any way. These different windows are all very important for their own reasons. I'm going to go through them because this is the foundation for what we're going to do later in the tips and tricks section. What you need to look at first is this composite window. There's some very important reasons to do this first, and we'll get to those. Let's go down here and explore these buttons in the composite window. This one is previous frame, basically a navigation tool to go back to the frame before the one you're on. The next one is play, and as you can see when I hit play, it also changes to a stop indicator, so it's play and stop. The next one is the next frame, so if you want to go next frame over, one frame back, play through, these are your transport settings here, very basic. The next one over is your loop mode, your project loop mode. This one that's showing here looks like a loop. It's a very basic setting. If I hit play, it's going to go through the whole entire effect, then loop back beginning to end, beginning to end, beginning to end in a basic loop function. If you click this once, you'll go to an icon that looks like this, and that means once through. You'll start at the beginning, go all the way through to the end, and stop and wait for you to tell it to do something else. And finally, if you click it one last time, you'll get the forward-backward mode. It's going to start at the beginning, go all the way through the effect, and then go all the way through the effect backwards. So it'll just go back and forth, and it might be handy for you to use that in some situations, and it's there just in case you need it. I use loop mode most frequently because it's the default and it's what I'm used to. These next two are very important, and in fact why we started at this part of the user interface. The next one is preview quality, and the one next to it is preview resolution. We're going to start with quality. If you've got this blocky, jagged edge here, that means you're in draft mode. If you've got a very smooth, straight line, that's high quality mode. I recommend you work in draft mode. It'll become more apparent when you work with 3D extrusions, 3D splines, and a lot of detailed media, maybe more tracks, but it's really going to slow your program preview down if you have it in high quality mode. I usually use preview quality. As you can see, it didn't change much about the soccer ball. And there's another reason for that we'll get into over here, preview resolution. We've got this set at half, and you can tell because you've got a small square about half the size of the bigger square. You can change it to full, which in this case doesn't do a whole lot, or you can change it to a quarter, which really makes it a little bit blockier. If you're having preview problems, it's going way slower than you think it should, it's hanging, anything like that, make sure you do this first. Change it to draft, change it to half, change it to quarter if you need to. And this should drastically improve your previews. This is the main reason I started in the composite window, because these are the things that people overlook. They don't understand why their CTI won't move in the timeline, why it won't update the composite window or the preview monitor. This is why. You've got to set these settings and give your computer a little bit of time to breathe between these frames. And you do that by basically asking to see a little bit less accurate representation of the actual pixels in the image. You're still getting a good idea of what's going to happen. It's just the pictures aren't showing up as clearly as they will. And keep in mind this is only for preview. This has no effect on your final rendering or when you apply to an effect and leave. Has no application to that. It's only showing you here in this window what it's going to look like. So it's very handy to use preview resolution of half and a draft quality mode at the very most. I'm going to skip this. I'm going to come right back to it. But this sort of goes along with the preview and the resolution. It's the scale. Right now my setting is to be working with DV video, 720 by 480. I've got that set in my preferences file, which we're going to go over a little bit later. It's very important too. As you can see, this is nowhere near 720 by 480, and the reason is because I have this set at half scale. So I'm working at half scale. Again, this has no effect on the outcome of my effect, only for preview, and I can change this to 100%. What I think is handy is that the window doesn't get any bigger, just the preview, which is very nice. However, if I had two monitors on this configuration, I could easily pull this over to my other monitor, size it accordingly, and then see 200% if I wanted to, 100%, whatever I want. Again, you're going to get a quicker preview if you're operating at half scale. You can go all the way down to 6 1/4, all the way up to 1600 for getting in very close when you're editing or making masks or whatever. Now, when you're working at half scale, it only makes sense to work at half resolution. Working at half scale and full resolution doesn't give you a whole lot more than working with half scale and half resolution. It's common sense, really. So I usually work half scale, half resolution, and draft mode. I find this way my previews fly. Change preview channels allows you to take a look at any of the RGB or alpha information separately. If you want to look at just the red channel, for example, just click red, and you've got a grayscale representation of all the red information in the image. Again, same with the green, changes a little bit, and then blue, you'll see that changes quite a bit. If you're making a mask and you want to make a mask from one of the channels, this is a good way to see what you have available in each channel, which channel would be best to make the mask from. Again, go back to RGB. You can also see alpha. In this case, we don't have any alpha information, so it'll just be white. But if you did, it would show up there. Finally, you've got one button that toggles on-screen controls. There's several controls inside here that you need to be familiar with. The shape is going to draw a shape around the track's media. And this is handy in case you move the media off the screen and you want to see exactly where it starts and where it ends. That's handy there, but for now I'll just turn it off. Position point is going to give us a representation of where the middle is, and I think you can see that right there in the middle of the soccer ball. That's the position point. That's handy reference if you need it. We'll turn it off. Motion path is going to display, this right here is the motion path. It's going to give us a visual representation of what the image is going to do between the two keyframes. As you can see, this one is going to move along this path right back up here. Turn that off for now. Sometimes you might need some references. You might need to see, for example, rulers. This particular ruler is in pixels, as you can see, 720 by 480. But you can also set it to different scales. That's in the Preferences menu. Again, we'll get more into that later. It's very important, and you'll see why. If you want, you can see a grid and the rulers, or separately, just the grid without the rulers. This grid in particular is 8 units by 6 units, which is just another way of saying 4:3, which is the aspect ratio I'm working in with 720 by 480. And you can set the grid up, again, in your Preferences file, just about any way you want. Let's go back to rulers. Sometimes you may not want a grid, but you may want some references and the rulers. You can get that very easily by clicking and dragging out from the rulers. You'll get a nice little interface there, a nice little reference there that tells you where you need to be. And there you go. And you can use these, you can move these around by just clicking and holding Control until you get this, and then you can move it, and click and move it, drag it. You can get rid of it by hitting Control and then dragging it back from where it came, or clicking Control, put your mouse on it, and just hit Delete. A couple of different ways to get rid of those guides. So that is the rulers. And again, if you want your guide, say you've got a couple of guides here and you want to keep them, but you don't need the rulers for right now, hey, that's perfectly acceptable. Get rid of the rulers, you still got the guides. And then always get rid of the guides by Control, Delete, Control, Delete. So those are the rulers and the guides. Checkerboard refers to what's underneath your images, what's going to show you what is transparent. If you've worked with Photoshop, you know that the checkerboard for Adobe programs designates what's transparent or lack of any media. And the same thing applies here. You've got a checkerboard. The reason that they give you this option is that sometimes this is actually going to slow down your previews. The checkerboard is a little bit more graphics intense than, say, a solid color, which is exactly what replaces the checkerboard when you turn it off. And you can set the color of this, again, where? In the Preferences setting. I'm going to leave the checkerboard on because I'm not going to be doing anything that hinders my progress. One last thing here, title safe. You've got the standard title and action safe boundaries. If you don't know what these are, the inside box is where you need to draw your titles. This is title safe area. The outside box is where your action should be. It's the action safe area. Many TVs cut off this outside 10 to 15% actually of the screen, so that's why you want the action to be within this outside box and the titles to be within the inside box. This final window is the current frame time. This is going to tell you where you are in your effect. Right now it looks like we're on the 14th frame of the effect, and as you go down here you can see that that is actually right, 14 frames. And if we go back, we're going to see it update in real time there, where we are exactly in the effect. So that's how the timeline works together with the composite window. That is much of what the composite window offers. The main things I wanted to stress here: preview quality, resolution, and scale. These are all very, very important for new users because these are the things that hang users up the most. Back up here at the top, we do have some options that I'd like to check out real quick. Preview, you're going to be able to connect to an external monitor through most of these applications. You can do that with a FireWire device such as the Canopus ADVC100 or some kind of client monitor that's connected to your system. And when you connect, you'll be able to then auto-update the monitor, which takes a little bit away from your processing speed. So I don't really recommend that. However, display frame to monitor and display high quality frame to monitor are very handy. We'll get more into that a little bit later as we start working with masks. These are very handy to actually see on a TV or monitor what your mask looks like and how well you have things hidden with your mask. And then you can just hit refresh image and you can learn and remember these shortcuts as you're working. I know that Control and Shift P is a very good one to use when you're displaying a high quality frame to the monitor when you're making masks and stuff. It's very nice to have that shortcut just to be able to shoot an image to the monitor, update it, and see if you've gotten everything you need to taken care of. And you can explore some of these other options a little bit on your own. They're pretty self-explanatory. Many of them are redundancies of the stuff that I just showed you, such as quality, scale, resolution, and that. So, redundancy is key in Boris. You'll see many different ways to do the same thing while you're working with Boris programs. And I think that's cool because many of us are used to working a certain way and many of us like the way we work. However, many of us are used to working a certain way and really don't like it. We want to change, we want to be able to do something a little bit differently. And along those lines comes the controls window. The controls window is one place that you can change parameters for your effect. Remember I said one of the keys to Boris programs is their versatility and redundancy. Well, there's a bunch of different ways that you can change parameters and make some movement and create an effect. This is just one of them. However, I really like the controls window because it's always up. As I change my video tracks, it changes to show me what track we're looking at, and it's very handy. I don't have to do any of the twirling down that I have to do in other programs. If you like that, if you like the twirling down, we've got that too in Boris, so don't worry, we'll get to that in just a minute. But first I want to show you how to adjust these parameters. As you can probably guess, you can use these sliders to change the position or whatever parameter it is that you've got here. You can use this slider, just kind of drag and hold and drag rather. As you can see, that's going back and forth there. And the same for this. All these sliders work in exactly the same way. Position X and Y you've got, these are obviously left and right and then up and down. If you have trouble remembering what's X and what's Y, you can try out this tip I use. Yes is Y. When people say yes, they tend to nod. When you nod, your head goes up and down. It's a long way around for that one, isn't it? However, it works for me. Position Y is up and down, and I remember that by thinking, yes, okay, that's right. And then, of course, you have a 50-50 shot, so X is the other. No. This button right here will center the frame, so it'll default these two tracks back to the middle. And that's very handy. This is interpolation. Basic idea of interpolation is how the effect is going to get from one frame to the next. Is it going to be a very linear movement, such as this indicates? Linear. Is it going to be very mathematical and calculate exactly the same value for each step in the movement? That's what linear means. You've also got accelerate, which starts out slow and then speeds up towards the end, and decelerate, which does the exact opposite. It begins quickly and then slows down for a smooth landing. Ease in and out is a very nice effect. It starts out very smooth and slow, gradually gets quicker, and then comes in for a smooth and slow landing. Ease in and out. The rest of these we'll get to in a little bit. Those are the main ones you need to know. Also, hold is very important. In case you don't want it to react until it hits the next keyframe, you can hit hold. And that's going to defeat any interpolation. It's going to just hold until the next keyframe tells it what to do, and at that point it'll snap to those new parameters. Constant is good for working in compositing because it's not going to pay any attention to the next keyframe. That's what constant is. It's going to set a constant status for that parameter. And then none, as you'll see, these interpolations automatically come up, and the default is specified where? In the preferences settings. Yes, we're getting there. The default is displayed there the minute you make any kind of change. You can reset these, but the interpolation still stays there. However, if you come up here and hit none, not only resets it, gets rid of any interpolation, which really doesn't matter if there's no keyframe. If there's no adjustment to the parameter, there's no movement anyway, but that's kind of nice to be able to go none, no, sorry, forget it, I don't want to make any changes. These are all pretty basic, X, Y, and Z. Z is Z-space, depth. More about that later. Trails are the trails following your image while you move it on the track. Well, they will be if you make some adjustments here, and you can do that by using the slider. Another way to do this is just kind of click and hold in the box. We'll try it for opacity. Click and hold in there and you get a couple of an arrow either way, and that'll allow you to adjust. Opacity, again, how transparent do you want the track? Pretty basic stuff. None resets it. Scale X and Y, as opposed to position, are actually scaling the media on the track. And it's cool because you've got this lock here that allows these two to be locked together. If you want to move them individually, you can. If you only want to scale the X, you can make it look all crazy. But if you click that, then you can also get it where you want it and then lock them. Again, I think it's very cool that they lock so you don't have to enter values for both of them. The third way to make adjustments is simply enter a value in the box and hit enter. So there I've shown you 3 ways that you can change one parameter in Boris. As I said, redundancy is a big thing. They like you to be able to work the way you want to work. This toolpad here doesn't even actually belong here. It's not built in. You might not even see yours. I like to leave mine there because it seems to be a nice little void of information that I can tuck my toolbox into. These dials are a little bit different than these. As you can see, these are sliders, these are dials. That's because these indicate a degree of turn. As you can see, I'm going to pull this down, and where about 90 degrees would be, it says 90 degrees. Well, mine says, yeah, there you go, 90 degrees. There's 180, and you can see what's going on with the image over there as I turn around. Now, as I get to 360, you might think it's going to go 361, 362. Well, it's not. It's going to go 360, and then it's going to hit 0. But up here, you've got a 1. This is full revolutions. So you've got 1 full revolution plus 0 degrees. In other words, 360 degrees. So as you keep spinning, you keep building these revolutions here. That's not the only way to do it, obviously. You can click in here, hit 0. Say you want 17 revolutions, just type 17 in there, and you've got it. I'm going to reset this to none. One quick word about this. Tumble X and spin Y and rotate Z. Since I gave you the shortcut up here, X and Y, Y is up and down like yes. This means that your image is going to spin on this axis. In other words, for spin Y, we know that Y is up and down. This means that Y is going to stay while the rest of the image spins around that axis. So you can take a look at the preview monitor there to see what's happening on the spin Y. Y is staying exactly the same. The rest of the image is spinning around the Y axis. So I'm going to go ahead and hit none here. And then Z is spinning the entire image all the way around. None again. Down here we have a color ramp. Any parameter that allows us to select a color will have an eyedropper tool, and all we have to do to use that is click the eyedropper tool, come down here on the color ramp and click any color. This is a full spectrum of colors here for you, so that's very nice. Let's mess up some of these parameters. Oh boy, there's our trails, by the way. Okay, we've got some stuff going on here. We've messed up everything. That looks terrible. That's not what I want. Well, this is a simple reset button. It's going to reset all the visible parameters to what the defaults are. So that's a good and nice to know about. This toggles to the face or shape of the track. We'll get more into that a little bit later, but each track has a face and a shape. You can see we're going to the host media or to the track. Basically, are we affecting the track or are we affecting the actual media in the track? More about that a little bit later. Let's go like this, move this soccer ball a little bit this way and up, and then click this. This is the drop shadow button. You can see the drop shadow showed up here. Then turn that on and off. You can adjust it up here, and also another redundancy, another way to turn it on and off is right here. You can see that actually moves this button and moves the X. So you can turn it on and off either way. You can change the distance of the shadow, the opacity, and these all have interpolations. Imagine that. You change them one place, they're going to go back to the default at a rate specified by the duration between the two keyframes. So we'll turn it off for right now. Now if you don't like that, if you want to work in a mode sort of like After Effects where you have to actually tell it that you're going to be making an interpolated change, you can use this next button down here that I want to show you. This is the toggle between animate and static mode. The red key means animated. It means each keyframe has values, and it's going to go from those values to the values at the next keyframe in the interpolation that you've specified, however it is. It's going to make that change for you. This static mode means that whatever parameters I make changes to are not going to change over time. They're just going to stay the same. And that's handy for compositing. If you're into compositing, you want to use Boris RED or Boris FX or Boris Graffiti in some fashion that doesn't constitute the manipulation of images over time, just use the static mode. It's handy to know about. And that, my friends, is the controls window. That's pretty much it. Of course, we have a lot of different menu items up here. We won't get into each one of these because that would take all day. But basically, you know how to manipulate these different parameters 3 different ways now. You can use the slider. You can simply click in the window, or you can type in a value. You also know about interpolations. You know how to reset everything all at once. And you've got a pretty good idea of what each one of these parameters in the position menu does. And that's a good start. Let's move on to the timeline. The timeline window, just like all the others, is scalable and movable. However, it generally stays behind the other windows if you move it, and that can be a problem. Again, Control semicolon will snap it back to where it belongs. This is filled with redundancies. Just like the rest of RED and the rest of all the Boris programs, you can do tons of different things in tons of different ways. We'll start by showing you all these quick buttons here. All these will add media to your track, to your project. This is audio, you've got a movie file, you've got a still image file, a color, a gradient, a natural, a spline. All these different things add all kinds of different stuff to your project. For example, you've got vector text, you've got extruded text, all kinds of things you can think of you can do right here in the timeline window. There's also other ways. You can right click in the timeline window and bring up a huge menu that allows you to do all the different things like new shape, 3D plane, 3D sphere, 3D extrusion, line art, cube, sphere, cylinder, all kinds of different things. Before we get started, you need to understand that Boris looks at things as potential 3D objects. Nothing in Boris is a plain flat sheet of paper. Everything is a potential 3D object. So your general plain flat video is actually a 3D plane. You can see that here. Video 1 is the default track, one of the default tracks here. It usually brings up 2, unless you set that in your preferences. You can change this track shape by clicking on the track shape icon. 3D plane is the default. You can also make a sphere, an extrusion, line art, cube, sphere, cylinder, or a page turn. Handy little page turn effect. For now, we're going to leave that as a 3D plane, and I'm going to show you how you can bring different media into the track. Right here is the track media button. Video 1 is the default, and this is for if you're working as a plugin to an NLE. This will put video track 1 on your video 1 and video track 2 on track 2, which is, I think, the way it should be. This makes sense to me. This is the visibility button. It's going to tell you whether or not the track's showing. You can turn off the visibility of the soccer ball, and you'll see up here the bottom of the soccer ball disappear and the brick wall come up when I hit that, and that's what that does. And if I hit this one, we get the checkerboard. Filter visibility means if I've got a filter applied, I can turn it off for the time being and see what I'm missing, what it looks like without and with. You can do that right here. We'll use that when we start adding filters. This is going to preview whatever media is on my track in a separate window. So let's go ahead and hit this, It's going to bring up video 1 in its own little window here, which is the soccer ball by default. So that's nice if you want to be able to check out what you've got. And there are other applications, other reasons that we want to do that we'll get into later. This is going to put the motion blur on or off. More about that later. And this is going to lock the track so that we can't do anything to it. So just using these track indicator icons here and all these buttons here, we know we can add just about anything we want to the project. If we don't want one of these tracks, all we have to do is click it and hit delete, and it's gone. I'm going to undo that with Control or Command Z. You want to rename the track, just highlight it, hit enter. Renamed track 1, or TARC 1 in this sense. I think I'll use the English spelling here. Track 1, thank you. Same thing for 2, hit enter. Renamed track 2. And it's very simple to name tracks. Here we have, what is this? Twirlies. Just like other programs you may have seen, you have twirlies that you can open to reveal more information about that track. You see these transformations? You twirl that down. Look at this. Position, pivot, camera, motion blur. Does this ring a bell? This is the same exact information that was in the controls menu. So if you want to adjust position, X or Y, well, you can do that right here. It's all in the twirly menu. So that's nice to know. Also, you can reset the interpolations and then just twirl up. So you've got tons of different things down here, but they're all the same as they are in the controls menu. Again, just another redundancy, another way of doing business. However you want to do it, Boris doesn't care. It's going to let you do it however you want. Right here is a very important window, the duration of the effect. The default is 1 second in this case. If you want to change it, all you have to do is click that and enter a value. I'm going to change it to 10. That's 10 frames. Actually, I want to change it to 10:00, and that's 10 seconds. And then you'll see that my current time indicator and my timeline here has changed my values from 0 seconds all the way to 10. Nothing's happening here because I haven't set any different keyframes. But I can change the duration of my effect simply by changing the value here. Let's make it 3, and you'll see what's going to happen here when I hit enter. Changed from 0 to 3 seconds. Also kind of squished things down here, but that's okay. And now I'm going to just basically create a very simple effect to show you how easy it is to make an effect in Boris RED. Let's start with the values that are defaulted. Let's go halfway through at 1:15. My time window right here tells me I'm at 1.5 seconds. My keyframe window tells me I'm at the keyframe of 0. But I'm going to make a new one, and I can do that in a couple different ways. Track, new keyframe. Also Control N will do that for me. And now it tells me that I'm on the keyframe at 1 second and 15 frames. So that's good reference material to know. Also, it's red, so it's kind of hard to miss it. But if you've got a bunch sitting very close together, this is handy to tell you which one you're actually on. Now, at this keyframe, I'm going to go make some adjustments. I'm going to do them down here just for the sake of being able to see what I'm doing. I'm going to make some position adjustments. I'm going to move the ball off screen to the left. And I'm going to move it also this way. I'm going to close that. And as we can see, there's nothing in our window. We got no soccer ball here. But that's only at this keyframe. At this keyframe, let's go hit home. And at the home keyframe, we've got the default image. At the end keyframe, we've got the default image. So let's see what happens when we hit home. And we've got it in draft mode and half resolution. I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter. Excuse me, spacebar. Just going to go ahead and hit spacebar, and that's what happens. So we have easily created motion with only one keyframe, adjusting 2 parameters in that keyframe. And you can see that it's in loop mode because it's just going one way and then going straight back and starting over. If we had it in forward-backward mode, it would be doing full circles. And so we've created a very simple effect by manipulating parameters at one keyframe in the effect. Those are the basics of the timeline window. You're going to be working a lot in this area, setting keyframes, clicking on keyframes, and changing values either in the controls window or down here in the timeline, whichever way you feel best doing it. You can add media to your project right here in the timeline window. You can change your duration here in the timeline window, and you can change the shape of the media and also the content of the track right here in the timeline window. So those are the basics of the timeline window. There's one more I want to show you really quickly, and that's the project window. Okay, as for the project window, I'm going to be completely honest with you, I don't use it. I usually close it here and extend this timeline all the way over so I have more real estate to work with. That's up to you. I'm going to show you what it does, and then you can make your own conclusion about how useful it is. The project window will allow you to add more compositions to it and keep track of your compositions here, whether in frame view, which gives you a good idea of what it looks like, or a list view, which is a little bit smaller. And it also lets you look at the render queue. If you put things in line to render, you want several different projects to render, and you add them to the queue and then come back later and render them, this will show you everything you've got here. Now, to save your composition, you can just basically save it here, and there it is. You can rename this composition. You can right-click it and rename it. You can come up here to Composition and rename it Compo 3. See, it changed the name here. You can make a new composition in the same project very easily and switch between the three by double-clicking on it. You can sort by name, you can sort by length of the composition, the source length, or the type. You can go back and highlight one and add it to the render queue, and then come to the render queue, and there you see it. And I'll delete that because I don't want it there. So it's a nice way to manage files and projects and compositions within a project, but I just really don't use it. So that's what it does. I'm sorry I didn't go into more detail, but I really don't find a whole lot of reason to use it. Generally, I close it, hit Control and semicolon, and that's the way I like to work with Boris RED. I like to have this whole bottom half of the screen, my timeline, so I have plenty of room to move down here and show myself what's going on. And as you can see, this is interesting, nothing shows up in the controls panel if you don't have a track selected. The minute you select the track, there are all your controls. So that is a basic overview of the interfaces of Boris RED, Boris Graffiti, and Boris FX. Again, they're all very similar. Again, they will look the same whether you're using them as standalone engines or as plugins to your favorite NLE. And they are completely customizable and reshapeable, movable. You've got the one shortcut that gets everything back to normal, Control or Command and semicolon, and that makes for a wonderful little way to get everything back to the way it is. Now that you've got basic knowledge of the controls and the interface under your belt, you can start exploring on your own. However, I'm going to lead you through some exercises that I think are pretty important, and you'll be able to pick up on some things very quickly. So let's move on.